The morning of March 2026 began like any other patrol in the volatile waters of the Strait of Hormuz, but it would end as the site of the most catastrophic naval miscalculation in the history of the Islamic Republic of Iran. This is the definitive account of Operation Ship Recovery, a high-stakes maritime engagement that saw an elite Iranian hijacking attempt met with the overwhelming and surgical precision of the United States Navy and Marine Corps. The incident centered on the USS Porter, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, which was navigating the narrow transit lanes of the strait on a standard freedom of navigation mission. Unbeknownst to the 220 sailors and 80 combat-hardened Marines aboard the Porter, a shadow was falling over them from the Iranian naval headquarters at Bandar Abbas. 72 hours before the first grappling hook struck the Porter's hull, Admiral Rostami of the Revolutionary Guard Navy had convened a clandestine meeting in a sealed briefing room. His objective was as daring as it was reckless: to seize an American destroyer intact, navigate it into an Iranian port, and present it to the world as the ultimate propaganda trophy of American humiliation. Rostami's intelligence reports suggested the Porter was isolated, lacking a carrier escort, and devoid of visible air cover. It was a perceived vulnerability that would lead to total ruin for his forces. The plan, meticulously crafted by the IRGCN elite, involved a flotilla of 22 vessels. The vanguard consisted of 12 seemingly harmless civilian fishing dhows, designed to blend into the heavy commercial traffic of the strait. Hidden beneath their wooden decks were 60 elite naval commandos, veterans of maritime sabotage, armed with AK-103 assault rifles, fragmentation grenades, RPG-7 launchers, and specialized hydraulic cutting torches. Following these Trojan horses were 10 armed fast attack craft, high-speed boats with low radar cross-sections intended to provide suppressing fire and prevent any external intervention. The commandos had rehearsed the boarding sequence for months, practicing the art of scaling moving steel hulls and clearing tight corridors in the dark. They believed they had a window of 26 minutes to take the bridge and the engine room before the United States could mount a response. They were wrong on every tactical assumption they made. The first of 6 fatal miscalculations was the proximity of the USS Baton, an America-class amphibious assault ship positioned just 60 kilometers to the north. While the Baton was not visible to the Iranian scouts, it was in a state of maximum readiness, carrying 2,400 Marines and a full complement of MV-22B Osprey tilt-rotor aircraft and AH-1Z Viper attack helicopters. The second error was the composition of the Porter's crew. Unlike a standard patrol, the Porter was carrying a reinforced security detail of 80 Marines, battle-tested and ready for close-quarters combat. As the clock struck 11 a.m. on that fateful March morning, the 22-ship Iranian flotilla departed Bandar Abbas. The 12 dhows led the way, their silhouettes indistinguishable from the hundreds of other fishing vessels that dot the region. At 11:10 a.m., the USS Porter's Aegis combat system picked up the group. Initially, the radar contacts appeared to be standard traffic patterns, but the watch officer noticed a synchronized deviation in their course. Commander Sarah Mitchell, the Porter's commanding officer, was on the bridge when the reports came in. Mitchell, a veteran tactician known for her cool-headedness under pressure, conducted a rapid threat assessment. She had noted a steady increase in IRGCN activity over the previous weeks and had already placed the ship on a heightened state of alert. At 11:12 a.m., the contacts began to close the distance rapidly, moving within 800 meters, then 700, then 600. There was no attempt to signal, no slowing down, and no deviation from their collision course with the Porter. Recognizing the imminent danger, Mitchell ordered general quarters. Alarms blared throughout the destroyer, a piercing sound that signaled every sailor and Marine to their combat stations. Within seconds, the 80 Marines on board moved to the weather decks, their M4 rifles raised and M240 machine guns manned. Mitchell's third masterstroke was the immediate execution of preloaded access denial protocols. She ordered the bridge, the nuclear reactor compartment, and the engine rooms to be sealed from the inside. These areas were transformed into impenetrable steel vaults, ensuring that even if the Iranians made it onto the deck, they could never take control of the ship's primary systems. At 11:14 a.m., the distance closed to 300 meters. The 22 Iranian boats accelerated simultaneously, their engines roaring as they broke their civilian disguise and lunged toward the destroyer. Commander Mitchell issued the order that would seal the fate of the attackers. All weapons free. Defend the Porter. The ship's phalanx close-in weapon system, a 20mm Gatling gun capable of firing 4,500 rounds per minute, erupted in a continuous stream of fire. The leading Iranian boats were shredded instantly, their fiberglass hulls disintegrating under the weight of the tungsten rounds. 3 boats vanished in a hail of fire and spray within seconds, but the remaining 19 used the sheer volume of their numbers to surge forward. At 11:15 a.m., the 12 fishing dhows rammed the hull of the USS Porter. Steel grappling hooks, propelled by pneumatic launchers, bit into the railings and locked into place. Rope ladders were deployed, and the 60 IRGCN commandos emerged from their hiding spots, screaming orders and opening fire with their AK-103s. The boarding had begun. The first 5 minutes were a chaotic inferno of noise and violence. The commandos swarmed from 12 different positions, throwing grenades onto the main deck to create a curtain of smoke and shrapnel. 20 American sailors in the initial wave were hit, and 15 Marines were wounded in the first frantic exchange of fire. The Iranians pushed hard toward the bridge and the reactor access points, but they found every hatch locked and every corridor defended by Marines who refused to yield an inch. Captain Rodriguez, the commanding officer of the Marine detachment, coordinated the defense with surgical precision. Using the ship's internal communication systems, he directed his squads to flank the boarders. On the deck, the fight was brutal and intimate. Marines used the ship's superstructure for cover, engaging the commandos at ranges of less than 10 meters. At 11:18 a.m., a group of 20 Iranian commandos attempted to breach the bridge using cutting torches and high explosives. The armored door began to buckle under the intense heat, but Commander Mitchell and her bridge crew were ready. They manned firing ports and returned fire through the gaps in the door, while Rodriguez's Marines moved through the lower decks to emerge behind the boarding party. The Iranians were caught in a lethal pincer movement. Within 4 minutes, the entire bridgeside boarding party was neutralized. Meanwhile, the 10 Iranian fast attack craft were circling the Porter, firing machine guns at the American security teams to prevent them from clearing the deck. This was Iran's 4th and 5th miscalculation, the belief that they would have hours to negotiate and that no help was coming. 60 kilometers away, the USS Baton had already launched its response. At 11:23 a.m., 4 AH-1Z Viper attack helicopters arrived over the Porter. The pilots, having been on high alert status, wasted no time. They targeted the 10 circling fast attack craft with AGM-114 Hellfire missiles. In a span of just 8 seconds, 16 missiles were launched. 10 fireballs erupted on the water as every single fast attack craft was vaporized or broken into fragments. The Vipers then turned their 20mm cannons and hydro rockets on the 12 dhows tied to the Porter's side. Boat after boat was systematically obliterated, cutting off any hope of retreat for the commandos still on deck. The final blow to the Iranian plan came at 11:27 a.m. 8 MV-22B Ospreys, carrying 240 fresh Marines from the Baton, descended through the smoke. Using fast rope insertion techniques, the Marines dropped onto the Porter's deck from multiple angles. The 30 surviving Iranian commandos suddenly found themselves outnumbered 8-1. The fresh Marine units swept the deck with textbook precision, identifying and dismantling every pocket of resistance. The Iranians fought with the desperation of men who knew they were not going home, refusing to surrender and engaging in hand-to-hand combat until the very end. By 11:35 a.m., the last commando was neutralized. The deck of the USS Porter was cleared, and every one of the 220 American crew members was accounted for. The Iranian force had been completely annihilated, 60 commandos dead, 22 boats sunk, and not a single captive taken. But the American response was far from over. This was the 6th miscalculation the Iranians had made, the failure to realize that an attack on a U.S. warship in international waters constitutes an act of total war. At 11:37 a.m., Captain James Wilson of the USS Baton authorized immediate retaliatory strikes against the infrastructure that had supported the operation. This phase, the conclusion of Operation Ship Recovery, was designed to dismantle the IRGCN's regional capabilities in minutes. The battalion launched a strike package of 12 FA-18E Super Hornets, each armed with GBU-39B small-diameter bombs. These precision-guided munitions were directed at 6 key Iranian targets. The first target was the IRGCN fastboat station at Bandar Abbas, the very pier from which the 22 vessels had launched. 8 bombs struck the pier at 11:39 a.m., collapsing the infrastructure and igniting fuel storage tanks that sent a column of black smoke miles into the air. The second target was the commando training complex where the boarding operation had been planned. 6 bombs leveled the barracks and equipment warehouses, ensuring the facility was permanently decommissioned. The third target was the Regional Naval Command Headquarters. At 11:41 a.m., 8 bombs obliterated the command building and its satellite uplink stations, severing the IRGCN's ability to coordinate maritime operations in the strait. The fourth and fifth targets included a maintenance depot and a coastal radar station. The radar station, which had provided the tracking data for the attack, was blinded permanently as its antenna towers were toppled by laser-guided strikes. The final and most devastating strike occurred at 11:43 a.m. against the IRGCN's primary munitions depot. 8 bombs triggered a massive chain reaction among the stored missiles and explosives. A mushroom-shaped cloud of fire and debris rose from the site, visible from 40 kilometers away, as the entire facility was annihilated. By 11:44 a.m., less than 30 minutes after the first Iranian commando had set foot on the USS Porter, the operation was over. The physical and strategic cost to Iran was staggering. All 22 vessels involved in the attack were at the bottom of the strait. All 60 elite commandos were dead. 6 major military installations were in ruins, and an additional 14 fast attack craft were destroyed on the ground during the strikes. The IRGCN's regional command structure was effectively non-existent. On the American side, the USS Porter remained fully operational, with 0 critical systems damaged. The human cost, however, was felt deeply. 20 American sailors were killed in the initial boarding chaos, and 45 Americans, 30 sailors, and 15 Marines were wounded, many of them sustaining injuries during the intense close-quarters fighting on the deck. Despite these losses, the 170 remaining sailors and the entire Marine detachment were saved from what could have been a historic hostage crisis. The swiftness of the American response and the sheer lethality of the counterstrike sent a definitive message to Tehran and the world. The Strait of Hormuz remained open, but the cost of challenging the freedom of navigation had been set at an impossibly high price. Operation Ship Recovery stands as a testament to the readiness of the United States Navy and the lethal efficiency of the Marine Corps, proving that even a meticulously planned Trojan horse attack cannot survive contact with a prepared and overwhelming force. In the aftermath, Admiral Rostami was removed from his post, and the IRGCN entered a period of deep internal purging. But for the crew of the USS Porter and the USS Baton, the day was a somber reminder of the constant vigilance required in the world's most dangerous waters. The names of the 20 fallen sailors would be etched into the history of the Porter, a ship that refused to be taken, and a crew that fought with the spirit of the finest traditions of the naval service. March 2026 will be remembered not as the day America was humiliated, but as the day the Iranian Navy learned the ultimate lesson in modern maritime warfare: that the reach of the United States is long, its memory is sharp, and its response to aggression is absolute.